and welcome to this week's episode of the Healing Hour. Today we have our wonderful guest, India.
Hi, how are you guys? Good to be here.
Yes. So tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Okay, so I'm born and raised in Houston, Texas, H-Town living, and I have my own podcast. I model and I act, and I'm currently in nursing school, so.
Awesome. Okay, so today we have a special episode where we're going to be talking about the steps to healing. India's podcast is similar to my podcast in a sense to we talk about growth, spiritual wellness, and things of that nature. So she's a little bit of an expert herself. So we're going to be talking about that today. And the name of her podcast is Bloom and Be Podcast. Yes, and it's available on all streaming devices, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so check it out. And we're gonna remind you again at the end of this podcast to check it out. Yes. So, I guess today, like I said, we're gonna be speaking a little bit more about our both of our healing journeys. So for you, where did it start?
Okay, so healing is not a one-day thing, you know what I mean? It's definitely a process. And I think when it comes to healing, a lot of people don't acknowledge the fact of like what it takes to get there. For me personally, I mentioned this in my previous podcast as well, but I think oftentimes we need to kind of look at ourselves and realize what we put our energy into, what we put our money into. And, you know, when we say, oh, well, like therapy is too expensive or this and that, or I make excuses basically, right? And you look at how much money you're spending in on your nails and your hair and your outfits. And, you know, men go to the Gucci store every week to pop out in the club for one night, $1,000 on a shirt and outfit, you know, and it's like, we don't put that same energy into our well-being. So for me, it was more so taking a break and sacrificing the things that I wanted to take care of outwardly and just investing that into myself inwardly. And what I noticed is that I had to get into a deep phase of isolation to elevate and just better myself overall. The first step to healing is acknowledging what I need help with, my flaws, my toxic tendencies, my trauma, my wounds. And you know, when you're young, I feel like you don't realize what you're going through in the midst of the moment. Like when your parents go through divorce, there's nobody to tell you like, hey baby, it's not your fault. Like mommy and daddy love you, you know what I mean? Or just acknowledge the things that you're going through in that moment. So acknowledging and just investing into bettering yourself and helping yourself.
Exactly. No, I feel that that's something that I had to assess too. Like, how much are we actually spending our money on things that are gonna help better us?
Right.
You know, like I feel like especially like in ethnic families, we've been kind of sold to where if you invest in therapy, that means that something's wrong with you. You know, instead of going to therapy would better not even just you, but your family, your society, everyone around you benefits off of taking those steps to better yourself. You know, like I've had people tell me, okay, I can't afford therapy. And I'm like, you can afford, well, my therapy, there's so many outlets now. Like, for example, like, when I first pursued therapy, it was through Cerebral. It's an app. Okay. And they hook you up with a certified therapist and a psychiatrist as well if you need it. And so that was only $300 a month. I'm like, I know y'all spend more than $300 a month
on nails, everything.
Yeah, that's your nail budget for the month. And the investments that make, like, I feel like the idea of making long-term investments in ourselves isn't something that we are accustomed to, especially in our generation. Like, it's like we do all these things to look good for other people, but how much money do we spend feeling good as we look?
I agree. And have you noticed that, like, you know, for me personally, I feel like you and me, especially I know this about you, but you have a good read on people, and like you can see right through things. But have you noticed, like, especially in today's society, everything is like disguised as good looking, or like people will really put on a front and act like they're happy, like just it's just today's norm to just self-sabotage in a way where you're just feeding your body and your mind and your soul negativity, like drinking, smoking, partying, spending so much money every weekend, and not realizing how much like emotional suffering somebody's going through on the inside, because like I said, like you haven't really like tapped into yourself and just developed like the roots of like, okay, why am I this way, have you ever took like therapy yourself? I'm pretty sure you have, but like what are the
Yes.
differences that you feel before therapy? Because I know you've always been mentally strong and you've always like invested time into yourself as far as meditation and stuff, which I love that about you.
Thank you.
And I really do admire that about you,
Girl.
because that's probably why you're so like sane all the time. And I feel like even when you are going through something, you're able to really just put up a stronghold. So
Thank you.
I really admire that about you. But I really want to ask you, like, what are the differences between before and after therapy that you feel like you found helped you?
I would say that the catalyst to get me to actually enroll in therapy is I kind of had to assess that, okay, for so long I've been doing things myself, and I've been providing for myself, doing things for myself, wanting better for myself, and I was dealing with my emotions by myself, because like as strong women, we feel like we can't give that to someone else. And so I had to just assess that, okay, the way I'm doing things isn't working right now. Like it's not cutting it. So I had hit rock bottom. And so I went through like a major depressive stage. And I literally was like, I don't want to be here anymore.
Wow. Like
So
rock bottom.
rock bottom. Like I don't want to be here anymore. And so I just found some type of, I just found one, I guess, like beacon of hope of where, okay, I want to live. Like it was just that one idea. And so when I decided that I do want to live on this earth and I do want to join everyone in the world, I had to say, okay, let me start addressing my mental health like an illness and not a cold, because like with colds I feel like that's how I was assessing my mental health, like okay, it comes and goes, so I would do a little something to make myself feel better, and then temporarily. So it's not like, you know what I'm saying, like with cancer, right? Like cancer, we treat it as an illness, so it's like we have to do all these things to make sure that the cancer stays away, so it's actively healing when you're not feeling at your lowest, because it's easy to go and seek help whenever you're at your lowest, but it's not easy whenever you're actually feeling well. But those moments I always found came crashing down. So it's like I feel good right now, and then I'm not gonna feel good later, so let me put these things in practice every single day, so that way I don't hit rock bottom again, because I was like, I'm never going back.
I love that. And I love what you mentioned earlier when you said a lot of people feel like therapy, when you take therapy, it's like there's something wrong with you. And all it is maintenance, just to like be consistent in your well-being, and just focus on your three homes. I'm big on mind, body, and soul, and I definitely feel that, and I'm glad that you shared that, because it's just very vulnerable for a lot of people to even share that they've been at that spot where like, hey, like I don't want to be here, I don't want to deal with this, or just giving up. A lot of people do get overwhelmed in their own crisis because there's not enough support, or whatever the case may be. Me personally, I've experienced that as well, so I definitely empathize with you when you mentioned that. I think another thing that's helped me personally with my healing, right? Everybody goes through different things in their life. Me personally, with the family that I grew up in, especially coming from an Indian household, it was very like unstable because of like things that were taught in their childhood being passed down, and being raised here in America compared to being raised by parents that are from a whole different country, who stand on different traditions and values. It was just a lot of comparison. Comparison is a thief of joy, and that makes you want to seek validation from others. Like, okay, you're growing up being compared by your own parents who you look up to as a kid to other kids, and look at what they're doing, look at what he and she is doing, finished, became a doctor, whatever the case may be. And
Right.
I think that when you're in your process of healing, you need to find validation in yourself and knowing your own worth, knowing who you are, and not comparing yourself to others, or not comparing yourself to other people's problems. And or people will see rich people and be like, they have no problems, like,
Right.
you know what I mean? And I just feel like no matter who you are, how much money you have, or how poor you are, like, we all kind of battle the same things on the inside, I think another thing that helps me as well is meditation as well. Like, just getting out into nature, putting my phone away. I don't know if you feel the same way, but social media literally is taking up so much time from, I think, everybody.
Oh yeah.
It's just getting bad, you know what I mean? And I think it's just all about refocusing your energy and focus onto things that just help you and that mean something.
Right. No, I definitely feel you. Whenever I did like a short break from social media. Not because it was stressing me out, but because I had to seek something outside of myself. And when it was crunch time for me to get the things that I wanted to get accomplished, I couldn't. It did me no good. Like you said, comparison's a thief of joy. So while I was trying to work hard to finish what I needed to finish in that period of time, I was like, okay, being distracted by the facade that other people put on it's pretty detrimental to my own mission. And also, like, it's just not it's just not real life. I think we all know people like that are on social media living a make-believe life, because it's human nature to want people to think that you're doing well, and to a fact to where when we go through ordinary everyday things, because none of us are perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said in my last podcast, like point me to a perfect person, I'll point you to a liar.
Mm-hmm.
Point me to a healed person, I'll point you to a liar. Like none of us completely have it together, but social media is a tool to try to make people believe that we have it all together. And I think transparency is something that we lack as a society.
That's so big. And like what I've been trying to do more so on my own social media is like I'll like post a picture every day and I'll put like different emojis, like a happy face, a sad face, a mad face, and I'll just ask them like, how are y'all feeling today?
Mm-hmm.
And whoever votes, I'll check in on them and be like, let's talk about it, because I know that a lot of people don't express or have the room to express how they're feeling with the whole transparency situation, but just building that camaraderie with anybody, like you just don't know who's going through things. So being transparent is so big. And I wanted to get into this subject on, like, because we're talking about healing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to share a quick little story, and it's really about forgiveness, right?
Right.
I think people underestimate the power of forgiveness when it comes to healing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've heard of this saying, but when you have trauma, right, your brain can't store all of the trauma, so it distributes it to your body. And that's why you wake up with back pain or knots here, or just like knee pains, and people think it's just from working out, or just, it's really not. It's stored trauma. And the thing is if we don't like attack these things now head on, then later on in life it just becomes baggage, and it builds and it builds, and soon enough you're gonna have weight on your shoulders that you're not gonna be able to like lift up. But I had this situation with somebody that was so close and dear to me, just a form of betrayal, abandonment, and it put me back in like a really just like a deep rock bottom stage. I'm pretty sure everybody's experienced this, but a friendship breakup, I feel like, is the worst breakup.
Oh yeah, those are hard.
Those are hard. I feel like out of everything that you can go through, like a deep, close sister-like friend or a homeboy or brother-like friend, it's very hard to get overcome and get through. But what I realized is that 3 years after like me and this person stopped talking, I noticed that I was happy. I had a circle of great friends. I had a support system, and everything was going so well in my life. And I would wake up randomly feeling kind of down, I would randomly just feel off. I would randomly like get lack of sleep. And I would be like praying to God, like, why am I feeling so depressed? Like, why am I feeling like this? And I realized it was stored up trauma, and it was from years ago. And it was because I didn't really forgive this person like I thought I did. And a lot of times we think that when we forgive somebody, we're just distancing ourselves, we forget about it, and that's that. But forgiveness is really being able to operate in your absolute biggest form of love and compassion and kindness, and still being able to like pray for them, pray for your enemies, still be able to think about them and be like, you know what, I want to see you do good, even if you did do me wrong. Because when you have those wounds and that hurt, the hurt turns into anger. And so when you see angry people, you look at them and you're like, why is this person so angry? And you point them out to be such a bad person, when really they're just hurt from some type of pain that they experience and the lack of the forgiveness that they put out there. So forgiveness is one of the biggest things that's helped me heal from my wounds and my trauma. And I know me and Athena have talked about this on our like girls' night days, but we always like talk about our family and our upbringing and how we have like just trauma from like our parents not being able to, you know, just like you said, we're not perfect. So how do you feel like, you know, you deal with that with your parents? How is the relationship, and how have you overcame that like now as far as wounds?
Like I definitely wholeheartedly like agree with your comment that, you know, pain distributes itself. Like there's this book, I recommend y'all to read it. It's called The Body Keeps Score. And so it touches on the same subject that that you were talking about, to where it physically ails you. Like trauma begins to be embedded in your DNA. So the trauma that you endure literally starts to show up in your DNA and passed on generationally. You know, and that's where we get this stored generational trauma. And especially as women, we need to work very hard to heal this, because we store our pain in our womb. You know, so we have a direct spot in our body to where we are storing so much pain. And I feel like you know, just like the trauma that like my mother has endured, and her mother before her, you know, like it's up to us to break those curses.
And that's why it gets passed down, because it's like, yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly. Wow. So it's like it's no surprise that, you know, women of color suffer so hard from like a lot of like endometriosis and things of that nature, because of all of the past traumas that's been associated with our body is literally genetically passed on. So I think one thing that I've made it a point to do was to see my parents as people and not necessarily my parents, and to see them as people who are deserving of grace and are deserving of forgiveness. And, you know, like some parent more than the other. Like, you know, it's easy to forgive the parent that apologizes.
Of course.
And so with me and my mom, you know, her apologizing for the things that she, you know, subjected me to as a teen mom.
Your mom apologized to you?
Yes.
At what age? Was it like growing up, or did it have to get to that point of like?
I definitely think whenever I got older, so that's the thing about going through your healing journey, right? It affects everyone around you. So as you may not think it's a big deal to start going to therapy, you don't know who you're rubbing off on. And so I definitely think bringing my teachings to my mom and being actually able to express myself more to her, that I didn't get that chance whenever we were both growing up as I was a child, it inspired her to go on her own healing journey. So now like she does like a Bible study, and now she is looking to a counselor. And I think part of that was inspired by me.
I feel like, do you ever feel like you're the black sheep of your family?
Yeah,
like,
all the time.
Like you're the person who's supposed to be breaking that chain.
Exactly.
And that's a blessing. So good for you, because that's freaking beautiful.
Girl.
That you're able to like, you know, because I see so many people struggling with like their own parents, or like, I don't know if you guys have seen like the Black China with like trying to heal, and it's just so much baggage, you know?
Baggage.
And I feel that because it's hard, because, you know, your parent has a perspective, and then the child has a perspective, and it's just all about understanding. But that's beautiful that you're able to.
Yes, and it's been a long journey. Like, it's something that, like, I just made it a point not to give up on being my mom's relationship.
Wow.
And it takes two, so it's been times where I've put my mom on ice. Like, there's been times like when I first moved to Houston, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's just been boundary setting to where it's like, okay, you're getting on my nerves. Or it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if she's not receiving there's still times where I don't believe that she fully receives my emotions and doesn't validate them the way I want to.
Okay.
So in turn, I find myself, okay, well, I'm going to remove myself this time. We'll try again another time. But little by little, brick by brick, we're able to build a solid foundation that, whenever I was younger, we wanted to kill each other. We didn't get along. We didn't understand each other. Mm-hmm. Now with age, I feel like that's something that we're able to actually put a grasp on. Now, the parent that never apologized, that's a little harder. So, like I'm not really in contact with my dad. So, you know what I'm saying? I never really got that full apology. Like, okay, like, I'm sorry for abandoning you. It was just excuses. When I did talk to him, it was just like, oh, well, your mom didn't include me. So that's it. Instead of saying, oh, well, here's why I fucked up as a father, and here is how we move on.
Right.
So because I never really got met with that apology, and never really got met, it's been very, very, very hard to forgive somebody who's not sorry.
So do you feel like you're still holding on, not necessarily to a grudge, but do you feel like you still have baggage that's left, on your heart from your dad, or do you think you've kind of like been able to forgive him?
I definitely think it's been a day by day thing.
Okay,
like it's been a step by step. We're still getting there. Like, we're healing every day. So it's like the resentment, I think, subsided, because whenever I was younger, I was like not gonna. I never hated him, but it was a resentment.
Gotcha.
And then it turned. First, it was a sadness when I was a kid, and then as a teenager, it turned to resentment. And then it kind of just blew into full-blown, like, apathy. Like, it is what it is. And so I still find this wound being highlighted in my relationships. Oh. So even though I put it off, like, it doesn't make me feel sad or mad anymore. Now it's reflecting. So I find myself having to deal with it in the romantic relationships that I deal with. So how do you think that that manifests, like, in your reality, like your trauma with your family?
So I'm gonna tell you like this, okay? I was in the same position as far as like taking it day by day and working on the forgiveness with my dad. And then, like I said, me and my dad, we haven't talked in like years. Like, I'm talking about like 10, 12 years, just not talking. And, I heard that he got admitted into the hospital like a week ago. And I didn't tell any of my friends this, like, nobody knew, but he got admitted because he had a stroke and he had previous heart attacks prior to that and almost lost his life. But I don't know, he's just a warrior, so I guess he overcomes it. But I realized I called him and I went out my way and I was like, let me put everything to the side. Let me call my father, because I usually call him by his first name. I was like, let me call my father, because at the end of the day, he's still my dad. And it takes a lot of strength to overcome everything that you're feeling, just to be there for somebody that you don't even know what the relationship is. And when I talked to him, I think it just came from a place of like, you know what, he's getting old, and not everybody gets a chance to change in the way that, like, it's a blessing that you're able to be as wise as you are your age. It's a blessing that we're able to receive the gifts of wisdom and patience and understanding, but not everybody gets to receive that young. Everybody has their own journey. But I guess it just humbled me, because it's like a discernment from God just telling me, hey, look, life is short and you can't spend the rest of your life holding on to things no matter what situation it is. Because if you expect to get forgiven for the things that you did, you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, we can't be victims forever. Yeah. We all have a phase in our life where we hurt other people or we push our trauma onto people. And I think just realizing that my family grew up in a whole different culture they grew up with their own trauma, they grew up with their own toxic parents, and you know, like a condition to learn a certain way. And me being able to understand that kind of reflected my relationship with my dad now, and now I'm just cherishing him and trying to just be there and show him that, hey, like I can, there's still love. Like you didn't get his dad died when he was like 14, very young. His mom wasn't around, so I'm wanting to show my dad love, even though I'm not able to just give it in the most open way. I'm trying to show him before the time permits, you know, because I'm understanding that it's closer to the age. So just understanding that life is short and you don't want to live off of regrets, you know, just because of a temporary emotion. When we die, like our emotions are not going to be there. Our emotions are so temporary, which is why we can't be moved by emotions. You know, we have to like control it with our mind, because you know you don't want to destroy yourself, or like I said, self-sabotage in the midst of feeling a certain type of way, you know.
Right. There's definitely strength in forgiveness, and that's something that you know, like despite my own feelings of whatever bitterness that I reserved, being able to forgive my dad and not feel that resentment, and like forgive my mom and give her grace, in the same way that I received forgiveness and grace from God, has been so empowering to me, because I always live by the not forgiving someone else. It's like drinking poison and like waiting to see their reaction. Like, I'm gonna drink this poison and look at you and be like, I hope you feel this. Like, they're not. They're not gonna feel it as intensely as you do, because you're the one going through it.
Exactly.
You know, so you can't drink the poison and look at somebody and expect them to hurt.
Exactly.
You know, you're just, you know, you're hurting yourself literally physically.
I agree. And you know how you mentioned that like you're still taking it day by day, right?
Yes.
You know what, like I really do like want you to try praying for him and like speaking life into your father,
right,
like in a way where it's like, you know what, like he's gonna change, he's gonna know what real love is, he's gonna one day be able to acknowledge like his wrongs, because when you do that, you're not only helping yourself, but you're helping him too. Right. You know what I mean? So that way there's room for him to grow, him to change, and for you to heal and for you to change. Like both people are winning. Whereas when you're just like shifting and distancing yourself and forgetting about somebody, then it's like you're only like looking out for yourself. When, I don't know if you heard this quote, I don't know who's it by, but it was like, have you not destroyed an enemy by making them your friend? You know what I mean? Like just being able to, like I said, operate in love instead of hurt.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's definitely been a journey, in a sense to where I kind of had to come to the realization, whenever I did pursue a relationship with him as a teenager, whenever I got reconnected with my dad, I was like I was so eager to restore a relationship, to where I actually was advised by my mom to, like, she was really worried about, is he going to hurt her again? So she, as to where I looked at it as pessimism, I was like, how do you know? Like, well, he's in my life now, so don't, you know, inject negative energy. And as an adult, I see where my mom's coming from, because I was still a fragile child. So when he disappointed me again, I was like, oh, okay, so this is just somebody we have to love from afar. Patterns. And I feel like as an adult, we have to assess who can we love closely, right, and who can we forgive and love from afar, without wrecking ourselves. Because I feel like a lot of times we give people too much weight in our lives to affect us. And so just like I said, like with my whole dad situation, it's like, okay, I'm not gonna give you permission to hurt me again. I'm not giving you that permission, and that's just gonna have to be okay with you.
I agree. And
it's like, you know, no hard feelings, but unless someone starts coming around with some consistency, it's like, you know where to find me.
I do believe that certain doors like need to be closed for other doors to open. Yeah. Even in your healing journey, you know, like That goes for friend groups, family, even the closest people to you can be the ones to like bring you down constantly, you know? So I agree with that, like loving from afar and making sure that you're not like taking 10 steps backwards, you know? Another thing that I wanted to mention is, you know, like I had this dream one day and sorry, I had to clear my throat. But I had this dream one day and I noticed that I was constantly dwelling in like my past, right? And the dream was basically me in a car, like driving forward, and I was trying to put it in park, trying to put it in reverse, keeps going forward. And it's not going fast, it's going slow, but I'm panicking. I'm like, why am I not able to put the car in reverse? Like I'm looking in the rearview mirror, like I'm terrified. Woke up in like a panic attack. And I tried to like pray about it and was like, what's this dream about? And I feel like God had to tell me, like, you keep dwelling in your past, sis. Like you are looking back, you have so many things that you're holding on to, and you need to just look forward.
Right.
So being able to have that tunnel vision and look forward and look out for your future self, discipline, consistency, and surround yourself with people that love and support you. And definitely, just like she said, not give people the opportunity to constantly run patterns and cycles onto you, because at that point you're just playing the victim game.
We have to blame ourselves.
You know what I mean?
Point.
At that point, you have to point the finger back at yourself and be like, well, what am I allowing? Because if I constantly keep getting, and this goes for any relationship with your parent or, you know, your spouse, your significant other, a friend, just being able to draw the line on like, okay, like, when's like the stopping point, you know? Because at this point, like, you're giving me more wounds when I'm trying to heal my own wounds, you know? So.
And then a little bit is like, I feel like my pursuing that relationship was a little bit came from my issues with being validated. So it's like, you know, like being abandoned, I didn't feel validated. And so whenever he came back into my life, I had these expectations that I expected were to be validated. And whenever they weren't, it brought me back to a cycle of, there goes that hurt. There goes that hurt. Like I'm channeling it right back. So all of a sudden, I wasn't a teenager. I was, you know what I'm saying? I was a 5-year-old sitting, waiting for a dad that never came, you know, that never came back. So it was like, it put me back into a little girl's place to where I figured that's whenever I got introduced to compartmentalizing hurt and pain and where to put people. You know what I'm saying? And adjusting my expectations of people, because my expectations for my mom are going to be up here. So I can't hold my mom and my dad to the same expectations, because I know I know that when I set my expectations for my mom, she can meet me here. I know whenever I set expectations for my dad, where he can meet me. So I can't confuse the two and expect that whenever we got reconnected, I got disappointed because I was holding him to the same standards as my mom.
That part right there. So
it's like, you know, just adjusting your expectations of people for yourself, like not as a down to them, but as a protectant for yourself. Like we have to protect ourselves from inconsistent people.
How did you know how you mentioned the validation that you were seeking from your dad? Do you feel like that affected you in your dating life or your relationships?
Oh yeah.
And also, how did you cope with that? Like from going from seeking validation and needing validation because of the wounds from your father to dating and being able to not seek validation or approval from your significant other?
Oh yeah, I definitely, as y'all know, as my friends know, like I've always tended to date men older than me. So I think that's where my father wound kind of comes into play. And so it's been relationships where I've met men with mother wounds. And my father wound and their mother wounds were sitting there like battling out, to where I was looking for someone to validate me, so I would be overextending myself and doing all these nice things, doing wife things on a girlfriend salary, doing wife activities, and with his mother wound wanted to be taken care of, wanted to be coddled, nurtured. So it was generally sucking the life out of me. It was literally sucking the life out of me.
Girl, I feel this in my
So
soul.
it's like, to me, like, I'm like, okay, like, if I do this, if I do that, if I'm the most awesomest best girlfriend, if I'm the most awesomest best friend, you know what I'm saying? Somebody's going to look at me and say, wow, yes, you are. Instead of me looking toward inwards and validating myself, like, oh, I'm a badass either way. Like, I don't need y'all to validate me. I went and overdid acts of service. I went and overdid and put myself on the back burner and didn't invest in my own projects, but would invest in my partner and spend all this time with my partner in hopes that I would get some type of validation in return that never came, because that's not where I was seeking it from. I was seeking it from my dad.
Got you.
You know?
Wow. That's some real stuff, because I definitely have gone through that in my life. And you know, like, especially with validation, some people that seek it from their parent, you know, they might not seek it in their relationships. They might seek it on social media. They might seek it in like their appearance. They might seek it in other ways, and that's fine. That's normal. It's okay. You know what I mean? But there's ways to like overpass that, you know, and get through that, because I think it all comes down to just being able to love yourself even in your wounds, your trauma, your flaws, and being able to like overcome just the toxic tendencies that you do, or you know, how you cope with certain things. So for me, you know, like validation, for example, like growing up without like my father there, I definitely had like the spirit of abandonment, you know, just feeling like abandoned, neglected, and it made me want to be like the best I could be for like my significant other in my dating life, like, and if I didn't meet those expectations, I would feel like just all the way down, because I'm like, I'm trying my best to be like just this perfect person. And then I realized, like, you know, I'm doing too much. I'm trying to seek this approval that I don't need from you. Like, what, this is not gonna, you know, like. But even with the wounds that I have, I think dating and like just being able to learn and grow with somebody is a beautiful thing when you have somebody that's doing it with you. But I do think it's important that when getting into your dating life, when you're in the process, or if not at all healed from things that you have dealt with, it can interfere. You know, you have to be willing to make a commitment, like, to yourself first before you commit to anybody else. And that just starts with recognizing what you need to work on, because that stuff will pass on to your relationship, and you're literally just adding more wounds to the other person as well, projecting your trauma onto other people. And I can admit this, because even in my relationships, I was just like, you know, always argumentative. It was a hard time for me to submit, because I didn't have a father to really submit to. I was always like, you know, like the man of the household, like, you know, so I just wasn't used to it. But now I'm starting to learn, because I'm getting into that feminine, soft, receiving stage. And I'm still learning that, because I've healed, and I'm still healing. Every day is a healing journey. But it's helped me in my relationships personally. So that's just something I recommend for anybody, is just to commit to yourself first before committing to somebody else.
So how do you think that you were able to tap into that feminine energy? Because that's also, you know, switching from like women who have you know, we all have feminine and masculine energies within us, but I feel like the result of trauma and survival mode is that I feel like a lot of times for women, we tend to over exude our masculine energy, because we didn't have that masculine energy that's gonna sit there and compensate for us. So we end up having like an imbalance. So how do you think that you assess that you had that imbalance, and then how did you come into yourself as a woman?
Okay, so let me start off by saying this, right? There's, you know how there's like gifts of tangibility, like materialistics, and then there's gifts of like just meaningful stuff. So I feel like people like you and me, we have gifts of patience. Like, we have the gift of patience, we have the gift of understanding, we have the gift of wisdom, and those are really gifts. Those are like gifts you could take to the grave with you.
Right.
And I feel like for me, it took me a lot to have the gift of like patience. And the Bible says a soft answer turns away wrath. And me having to realize that you can literally fight fire with fire, but it's not gonna be bigger. One of y'all just gonna get burned.
Right.
You know? It's like there's no winning when there's like there needs to be a balance. That's why there's yin and yang, black and white, sun and the moon, seasons. There needs to be balance. And to me, it's like you need to be able to, even in the midst of like just being able to understand that, does this really deserve my energy? If somebody's yelling at me, let me talk calmly, because that will eventually make somebody feel like, okay, like I'm yelling and I'm looking stupid. Like like she's not yelling back at me. Like I used to be like just like what's up, like a Hulk, like just like it was bad because I'm so like girly and I love to do my makeup and I'm just like I walk in heels and then here I am getting into an argument and then I switch my voice and I'm talking like just a G-Unit soldier, like I told you earlier, So I really had to master, okay, like I know where this is going, because 9 times out of 10 us women, we can listen to our gut and our intuition and know where things are heading. So it's like I already predict where things are going and I'll just be like, you know what, somebody's upset with me, like if I'm in a relationship and my man's getting upset with me, I'll just be like, hey, like let's calm down, and when we're both ready to talk about it on a clean slate, like just not yelling with our emotions, then we could do that. Like just handling everything in softness, because I think people feed off of others' energy. Like if you start cussing me out, I'm gonna start cussing you out, and then if you hit me and I hit you back, it's just gonna be fighting. That's why when people get into fights and one person loses, they have revenge in their system, because that's not gonna fix nothing. People think, oh, I whipped you or I did this and that's the end of it. No, it's like it's just burning, it's fuel.
Right.
So it's like just being able to like handle everything with like grace and love is the way I have operated in my softness. And it took me a long time to reach my feminine power, you know what I mean? Because I was in my masculine so long. Like, girl, when my mom would come home with groceries, my brother, I have an older brother, never helped her with the groceries. I was always like, all right, mom, I got you with the water. Like, growing up young, always doing everything in the house for my mom. So I was always in my masculine energy, always helping her fix cars, pop the hood open, like things that like the men in my household just didn't do.
Right.
So I think just being able to own it, like own your power and not like drift off or go based off of somebody else's fuel, and just staying in your own like feminine power.
No,
what about you? How do you say you operate in your feminine?
I definitely think that that lately I've been thriving in my feminine energy.
You have. I love it.
Thank you. I grew up, with a single mom, a grandmother who was head of the household. And so one thing about them, they're built tough. Like they're built tough. So like my mom is definitely like tapped into her masculine energy. My mom is like, she's an amazing woman. She'll sit there. She has literally replaced the bumper of her car like last month. Like, mind you, she's married now. Okay. But like girl, what kind of Bob the Builder is this? Like my mom will build a table from scratch. Like she fixed light bulbs. Like
that's impressive.
Yo,
that's
like
really impressive.
I call her Barbara the Builder. Like literally, like she's on it when it comes to that. But I think that's just a result of her never being able or never wanting to depend on a man. And so because of that, like, so because I think my mom like she is very like in her masculine energy a lot of times, I think one thing as I started to get on this healing journey and things is because I also have a pretty good like masculine energy about me as well.
Do you feel like it's hard for you to ask for help?
Yes. So now no. Okay. Now I'm more receptive. Okay. So like like the feminine energy is the receiving energy.
Exactly.
So now I'm more tapped into like as I get older, as I found my worth, as I found strength and femininity, because I feel like oftentimes we don't associate strength and femininity. We associate strength and masculinity.
That's so true.
So now that I'm like, okay, I can find where I'm strong in femininity. So that's where the creativity flows in, because creativity is feminine energy. So like just creating, your devotional, creating your podcast, creating my podcast, creating my books, tapping into that creative energy is where I find myself thriving the most. Instead of whenever I'm in hardcore grind, just go get them all, like, no problem solving involved. Yeah. That's whenever I find myself in lack mode. So the more that, and the more self-esteem and the more confidence that I grow, the more confident that I feel receiving, you know, because before I had that sense of self-worth, it was hard for me to ask and it was hard for me to receive, you know, because I always had women around me that were like, I do it on my own. So it's kind of like giving up those wills and then looking for partners who are willing to let me live like that, because a lot of men, like especially like in our society right now, they're used to women operating in their masculine energy. So a lot of men, you approach them in your feminine energy and they're like, well, I never had to do this. Like, yeah, like you were raised by like a single mom. Like, of course, like you're probably not going to be fully tapped into your masculine energy if you've never seen a man thrive in his masculine energy in the same household. So,
and you know what, guys, like I read a lot of books now on like the roles and like just how to thrive and like just your woman phase, your feminine phase, and that's helped me a lot, because when you don't have guidance, just like you said, it will throw you off and you'll be lost in the sauce like that, you know. So I've been just trying to like use my resources, like podcasts are amazing to like just bettering yourself, but I would recommend just always using your resources and your tools around you, because a lot of people will say, well, like, well, how do I master this? Or if I don't have that example, how am I supposed to know what to do or how to act? And it really just comes down to, we live in a day and age where there's so many resources around us, and we can become like the best versions of ourselves if we just use and, you know, actually like give ourselves access to those type of things.
Exactly. And so that is today's episode. And I would like to thank India so much for this collab, this Bloom Bee podcast x the Healing Hour podcast collab. And let us know where to find you. Like, give us your handles. Where do we find your podcast? What do we have to look forward to coming from you?
Oh, okay. Well, first, thank you so much, Athena. I love you so much. You're an amazing person. And I always appreciate your company as well as bringing me on to this podcast. You can find me, you can connect with me on my Instagram, which is legendtee_. And then you can find my podcast, the Bloom and Bee podcast, hosted by Tushar and Matthew, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and I do have a 31-day devotional coming up. It also has 31 days of prayer as long as a self-journaling page on there. So that is coming very soon. So stay tuned overall.
And we are so excited to tap in. Thank you so much. And this was this episode.